Welcome to Sandbox FOMO5 from Bureau Happold. Each week we pick short snippets from our most recent episode for your listening pleasure. These quick listens could be valuable insights, thought-provoking elements, or even practical advice that will no doubt enrich your life and knowledge. Sandbox brings together curious individuals interested in a specific topic to discuss, dissect, and interrogate it. The style is conversational, with experts from Bureau Happold and invited external guests who will add another angle to the narrative. Listeners are encouraged to gather around our podcast so that we can explore the latest advances in various fields and expand our collective horizons. Sometimes we'll tackle a subject head-on, sometimes a sideways view, but always with curiosity, expertise, and who knows, maybe even a dash of humour. What cities are already doing things brilliantly, be it cycling, walking? What's going well, Lawrie, and where?
I think some of the usual suspects definitely come to mind. There's no question that the major Dutch cities and Copenhagen as well are dealing with or addressing the development of integrated cycling networks, and cities which are scaled to take advantage of that, and clusters of uses which are scaled to take advantage of that. They're doing really well. As ever, with a transportation network, it's two things at once. It's the transportation system that you have, but it's always just as much the distribution of activity, the pattern of activity and uses, which matters just as much. What's known in the business as transit-oriented development. How do I reshape my city around those transportation systems? If we look across a swathe of leading Northern European cities, they do that very well. And I think there's a lot that we can learn in it. And it's really important to say that, again, we often look across the fence and say, well, grass is greener on the other side. Those cities, they're better resourced, aren't they? They have things that we don't have in London. I think it's to quote the mayor of Copenhagen, when asked about how did he afford his cycling initiatives, he said, how could I not afford them? Given the budget challenges we were facing, this was by far the most cost-effective approach to improving transportation and access provision for our people that we could think of. And I think that it does apply to a lot of the things that we're talking about here in the context of that need to lower the cost of quality of life that we're providing for a city like London. Some of these chosen right, the right active travel measures, the right sustainable travel measures are ways of creating a city which is both, it reduces the cost of the infrastructure investment now, it also reduces the operational and running cost of the city in future, the cost that we load onto our residents and businesses all the time. So really important to think of it in those ways.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And you know what, you made me think that whenever I meet somebody visiting from overseas in England, I always feel the need to apologise to them for the weather. And I'm going to stop that from now on. So obviously Copenhagen is a place that we can learn fantastic lessons from about, active travel, its dominance of cycling culture. But I imagine there's probably lots of lovely lessons we can learn from other cities around Europe. Berlin, for example, where I understand Bureau Happold has just celebrated 30 years of having an office there. And the projects that have been going on in Berlin, there's been a lot of work around sponge city initiatives, which my understanding is about trying to mitigate the impacts of floods, be it nature-based solutions involving living roofs and that sort of thing. I wonder if you can tell me, Rainier, I'll go to you first, if you can think of any exciting initiatives around nature-based solutions that have been helping in that sphere.
Yeah, definitely. I think from a London point of view, a lot of sponge city typologies that you can see around the city, we tend to call them SUDs or sustainable urban drainage systems, which are quite useful. Again, the whole premise there is to hold back water as long as you can and try to replicate the actual natural water flows and paths for runoff, given that cities are essentially massive hardscapes, and that built environment has that knock-on effect of really getting the water to source a lot quicker. So one good example is in Elephant Park, one of our projects. We developed a brand new park, which was very much focused on incorporating bioswales and rain gardens within that new park typology, which essentially was a mechanism for us to hold all the water in the park before connecting back to the existing drainage networks. Essentially what that does is it just provides a lot more resilience. It prevents any flooding of the existing systems, but it also helps to improve the water quality that then goes back into our local watercourses and back into the Thames. So again, London's doing a lot as part of the London plan to really leverage that. I think you can see it in a lot of other cities as well, are really picking that up.
this is a really important point that Rennie is raising here, that these types of what we would call blue and green infrastructure initiatives, they have multiple benefits because, of course, we're addressing those rising flood risks that are facing our cities in the context of climate change. But at the same time, rather than just providing a grey infrastructure piped solution to one challenge, they provide multifunctional spaces. They're providing the open space that we need. They're providing the routes for active travel that we need. So that one infrastructure investment is working harder. And often that one infrastructure investment into that new green space or park can be much more cost effective than the grey systems that we would otherwise have had to have built. So they make a real difference. And it's something that we're certainly applying as BH in our practice all across the world, and definitely bringing back into the London context as well. That basic insight, in a way, that came initially from the Dutch, that rather than fighting the water, you make room for the river, you make room for the water in your city. You don't have a flooding problem, you have a land use problem. You work up from that to create a city that works in balance with the natural systems that it's accommodating and gets the maximum out of those natural systems in terms of the wider ecological benefits and the wider public realm and community benefits, as well as just managing a water problem.
And what I would say is half the time they're invisible. You don't even know that they're there. So you don't see a horrible gully or a curb up stand. It's integrated into the natural environment. So again, it's that connectivity with nature. And again, that just feeds into well-being. People can really integrate and interact with those spaces. So when you don't have a large rainfall event, essentially it could just be a park or an open area, a grassed area or a flower bed. And then when it does need to be functional and do some heavy lifting, it's there to do so.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that quick dip into our last episode of Sandbox. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the show. You'll find Sandbox in all the usual places, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Bureau Happold's YouTube channel, and on the Bureau Happold website. What's more, if you want to join the conversation on X, known as Twitter to his old friends, use the hashtag BHSandbox. We'd love to hear from you on any of the topics discussed.